Friends, I've been asked to talk about the formation of Barisan Socialists, but I had a chat with a friend about 30 years or so old, and she didn't understand what I was referring to because of the events in that time occurred before she was born. So I thought I might as well go back a bit. So I'll talk about the recent history, that is history after the Second World War. After the Second World War, unlike today, Singapore, Malaya were strict colonies. They were colonies. Singapore, the economy, in Singapore, the economy was mainly an entrepot trade. We collect tropical produce from the surrounding areas and we sell them not directly to UK but to the British big business houses. They control the exit. So if you have rubber, it's very difficult for you to sell directly to UK market, and you have to sell in the London market. You can't sell to US. You have to sell London market. And the reason for that is they want to make some money. But more important is, I'll tell you later. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. The economy was largely controlled by the big business houses, by Bosted, by Henry Waugh, by Guthrie's, you know. And apart from the rubber plantations here, which I won't talk about, they were the main exporters and the main importers. So everything has to go through them. Now if you export rubber, and we are the major exporter of rubber from Malaya, from Indonesia, from surrounding areas, we have to export them largely through these firms. And Britain requires you to export them through London because they have to earn American hard dollars to pay for the war debt. It's only Nigeria and Malaya could afford to can earn American dollars, which is hard dollar. So we sell our rubber in London to the Americans. The British keep the American dollars and give us British pound, which is a devaluing currency. And that is how they try to pay up the dollar debt. Okay? But Singapore, apart from collecting rubber from Malaya, and Indonesia, is also a center of smuggling. And at that time, when you smuggle rubber from Indonesia to Singapore, it is regarded as legal. You just declare it in your income tax forms or in your form that this is smuggled rubber, and the guys are happy because Britain is earning the money. Okay? And we in Singapore, sad to say, we earn a lot of money from Indonesian smuggling. Whether you look at any of the Chinese tauke's around, Kotek Kun and all these guys, it's largely Indonesian money. And we were smuggling a lot. The money comes from, the rubber comes from Indonesia to Singapore, from Singapore to London, and we make a cut. Okay? At the first time, at the initial stages when Indonesia was in a mess, rubber just come out when you bribe the coastal guards. Later on, it was over-invoicing. Over-invoicing means when you send a rubber to Singapore, you send, say, 300 tons of rubber, you declare 100 tons. And if you are caught by the custom, you kick your chief clerk because he is making you lose money. You see? Your invoice states 100 tons, but he is putting 300 tons into the boat, which comes to Singapore. But the arrangement is he has a contract with a Singapore merchant whom he trusts, and who sells the 300 tons in London and pay him 300 tons worth of rubber, but takes a big cut. And that is how Singapore became very prosperous. Okay? In fact, you can mention any of the big tauques in Singapore. Most of them are involved in this. Now, we had no industrialization at all, and they were not happy to industrialize. They only want our rubber and tin and raw materials. And so, because it can't expand as fast as the needs, the population increased after the war, there was a great problem. High unemployment, very high unemployment, and rather low wages. So there was a lot of grumbling, but you couldn't organize. You know, during the first phase, after the BMA, during the BMA time when the British came in, we could organize. It was mainly organized by the communists. But after that, when the emergency came in, and just before the emergency, they started tightening up all the unions. If you are born in China, you're sandbagged, you know, all sorts of reasons you can't hold office. Tighten all the trade union laws, and therefore tighten all the trade union laws, and therefore the unions found themselves unable to organize. Yeah? So there was a lot of dissatisfaction. Now politically, politically, the concept that we are one country has nothing to do very much with economics. It was just a concept that it was an inalienable part. Singapore is a part of Malaya, and that's finished. That's all. Everybody accepts that. The younger generation accepts it. The younger generation pre-war were more tuned towards China, the Chinese, and in the Malays tuned towards Indonesia, and Indians, the INA, tuned towards India. But after the war, there is a radical change. People begin to accept that this is my homeland. So that concept of a new nation was very prevalent. The division which the British made, the 9 Malay states and the 3 Strait settlements, Malacca, Penang, Singapore, were just very artificial. As far as we are concerned, we just walk across the border. There's no block. We go to the university, we meet people from Malaysia. We don't care whether it's from Pahang or whether it's from Kedah or whether it's from Malacca. We are all same. So there was none of that divide. And also interesting to note is that among the Malay population, the loyalty to the Sultan, I'm a Johor, subject, or I'm Pahang, is no longer there. They were all Malayans. That was a change after the war. Okay? But among the Chinese population, the growth in nationalism was, of course, because of the war, because of China's revolution, among the Indians because of the INA, the Indian Revolution, and then Indonesia, the Indonesia Sukarno, very great influence among the Malay population. In fact, during those days, many of the rallies, Ken Chai was telling us, most of the people who attended the rallies were Malays and not Chinese. And that was a very surprising thing for me to learn. Because the Malays were up and in the front. The Malays of API, the Malays of Awas, Musliman's group, they were right in the front. The concept which we had generally among the people in Singapore, the concept is that we want to form a new nation, a nation in which there will be multicultural and in which people will be equal. You know? As far as citizenship is concerned, we are prepared to accept people who come from whether Sumatra, India, Burma, or China, so long as they stay in Singapore for 10 years. And it wasn't too bad at that time because during the war there wasn't very much immigration. So that was practically accepted by all. And that was written down in the People's Constitution later. That period of nationalism gave rise to the Malayan Democratic Union, MDU. The Malayan Democratic Union was largely an organization for English educated, English speaking. There are either Raffles College graduates, UK Cambridge graduates, you know, but they were basically English educated. But they were nationalists, completely nationalists. But so when the British wanted to separate Singapore from the mainland, they put it down in a McMichael's Treaty. This group organized together with the Malay groups, you know, into an organization they call Putera over the Malay groups and the ACMJA for the non-Malay groups. And they drafted a constitution called the People's Constitution. The key in the People's Constitution is that two things. One, acceptance of equality. Two, Malayu citizenship. It was originally written as Malayan citizenship. The constitution was drafted by John Eber and Willie Kwok. The citizenship was called Malayan citizenship. That means for Singapore, Malaya. But the Malay faction in Putera says it sounds colonial. So we should have the word Malayu. And in the discussion they agreed. If Tan Cheng Lock was one of those who took part. And so you have a Malayu Chinese, a Malayu Malay, and a Malayu Indian. It was accepted. You know? It was not Malayu means Malay, no. Therefore it was Malayu, Malay, Malaysian. You know? In a sense you may say why the Parti Kebangsaan Melayu Malaysia it was called and not Parti Kebangsaan Malaya, you know, or Melayu Malay. So it was a Malayan concept, you know, to replace the Malayan concept. Malayu is for this region, and that was the understanding. Now the People's Constitution stressed that Singapore should be part of Malaya. They presented the Constitution to the British, who at that time asked for people's views on their new proposals. But the British would not consider it, won't accept it. And so the result of that was they decided to call a strike, a hartal, 1 day, complete strike. Singapore was brought to a standstill, but it wasn't just Singapore. It was right down up to Penang. Hartal means a strike in Hindustani, because that was the Tan Cheng Lock's concept. He had learned it when he was in Bangalore in India during the war. He saw how the Indians went on strike. So he said we should have a hartal. And hartal is an Indian word, not a Malay word, not a Chinese word. See? So we have a hartal, and it was very successful. Every shop, all businesses were brought to a standstill. And that was a threat to the British establishment. Now, then we come to, you can ask me questions later, we come to the emergency. The emergency, in my view, is, as a friend said, is just an interregnum. is that the control of this country by planters association through the colonial office was stopped when the British came back after the war. And then during that period under army rule, we had more freedom. But as soon as the planters and the British at that time had not enough troops, the troops were sent to Indonesia. They fought in Surabaya, they fought in Hanoi, they fought in Saigon. British troops were fighting there because the French don't have enough soldiers, the Dutch don't have enough soldiers. And if you go to Indonesia, you go to Surabaya, you find pictures of Indian troops fighting against the Republican Army. You know? So they waited. When the situations in these two areas settled down, they decided to be tough here. And so the emergency was declared. The aim of the emergency, to me, was number one, is to decimate the Malay nationalist movement. So people like Bustaman, Pak Sako, Bahanuddin, these guys were targeted, and there were over 10,000 detainees arrested in the first day. The Chinese were targeted secondarily, but the Chinese was easier to deal with. So they put them in the new villages, and that brought about a clearer division of the society. From a multicultural society where we live together, work together, now you are in an apartheid policy. And that causes a lot of suspicion, a lot of misunderstanding. With the destruction of this group, the vacuum was filled when they started supporting people who, like UMNO, who would stand for not for a nation, but on a communal basis. They want special rights for Malays, and they think that is a way to go ahead. So the British, if you read Pete, Straits Times, the British thinks that if you have Tunku, you have Tan Ting Lok, and you have the MIC leader having bandy together, then there'll be peace on earth. But it didn't work. It didn't work, right? And that was the emergency. I'm running it quite fast, yeah? Now we talk about the Fajar and the University Socialist Club. It was in this period, 1954, with the emergency on, that we decided to form the University Socialist Club. Just before we formed the University Socialist Club, there was a group, an ABL group, Anti-British League, around the university. They were very secretive. At night, they pass you pamphlets. Those were the days in 1950. By 1954, 53, when we started the Socialist Club, we decided to be open, completely open. And those people like James Puducherry, who was in the ABL, Dola Majid, who was in the ABL, they were helping us, but discussing with us, but they kept the distance, so that the Socialist Club has no connection whatsoever with the ABL or with any left-wing underground organizations. We were above board, and that made it easier for us. So by 1954, when they introduced SEATO, Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, during the Cold War, we view it as an attempt to encircle China and the third world countries. You see? We do not want to participate in the Cold War. We are neither left supporting the Russians, neither are we supporting the Americans. We wanted to be neutral, and that is what we want to be, and that is our way forward, because we see no reason why we should support one or the other, you see. But during that period, apparently other people were also thinking the same, and that was why within a year they had the Bandung conference in Indonesia, you see. And of course the Americans don't like it at all, and so they just put a bomb in the aeroplane that was carrying a Chinese foreign office delegation to Bandung. They just blew it up in mid-air. Okay? And they didn't like it at all. But when we think backwards, if you look at the editorial of the Fajar generation that got us into trouble, we were charged for sedition. It was very mild, and they admit it was very mild. Okay? But we had talked of something which they did not like, and we were brave enough to talk about neutrality, about we not supporting them. And so in the British establishment there was a split. The governor thinks they should arrest us, but some of like Malcolm McDonald thinks these are university students, 2 years at the U, afterwards they'll be out and they'll be making a living, and just leave them alone. Okay? But the governor decided he has the priority and the right to do it. So he arrested us and we went to court. Once they arrested us and we went to court, we had help from London. John Eber, who had been arrested and sent to London, cabled us to say whether that he has got a QC to help us. He asked me to choose between Dienprit and I think it's Dinglefoot. Both were QCs, and both are prominent QCs, and they will come gratis. And of course I chose Dienprit because I feel Dienprit is a bigger QC, and Dienprit came and helped us to fight the case. But essentially it wasn't a legal fight, because with our arrest the dam broke. People who were the old feeling of being suppressed came forward. So we were having a lot of support from not only the workers but from the middle class and from our teachers at the university. In fact, some of the teachers at the university will support us and give us funds. And the records in Q has it that when these lecturers were asked why are they supporting the Fajar against the government, the reply was, we are just supporting our students, that's all. That was a good reply, but they knew that it was not a true reply. Okay? So we had a lot of support, and because of that they decided they couldn't fight the case. Because when we were arrested that morning, we didn't know it was a ISA or whether it was a criminal arrest. So when we knew it was not the ISA, then we asked for bail. Okay? And we refused to take bail. We said, get the Vice Chancellor to bail us out. We are university students. So ask Malcolm McDonald to bail us out. Malcolm McDonald didn't want to bail us out. So he got Sir Sidney Kane to bail us out, and we were quite happy. So we got out on bail. Okay? And then when we fought the case, I was given a choice. I don't know your lawyers, but Prit told me, look, how would you like to fight this case? Do we fight and we go out and start, talk about British atrocities from Amritsar to Patankali, and British atrocities and British suppression of liberation movements, or do we just say there's no case, and if the judge says there is a case, then we start the fight, So I was asked to make a decision, and I thought, well, we are much older. We are already 30 or 40 year students, and some of them were first year students, and I was a bit worried for them. So I told Prit, look, maybe we play safe. We just say no case. Although we had prepared, having read Nehru and everything, we had prepared the case of British atrocities in colonial countries. We had prepared. But I thought maybe it was my fault. But I told Prit, we won't do it, And Prit says, okay, as you like. But then I told him, if I take the first case, first line, and the judge says there is a case, then what do we do? If we fire all our guns, our bullets, and then the judge says there is a case, and I was quite certain the judge would say that, because we have never won a sedition trial. Even Bustaman had to pay a fine for saying Dara, Merdeka dengan Dara, right? Yeah, he had to pay for sedition. Okay? So, in my opinion, we probably will have to present our defense. Prit was very smart. He says, don't worry, he says, if the judge says there is a case, then we reload and refire. I don't know, lawyers are lawyers. They know how to reload and say the same thing in different languages. In different contexts, in different words. He says, don't worry, we just have to reload and now we'll refire again. He's a good lawyer, he's a QC, Anyway, he thought I was a bit cautious, so he took my advice. And that's why there was we would discharge without our defense being called. Okay? Although we had prepared, and we even had Stewart, a reporter. That time there was no tape recording. We had him to do it shorthand, and we hope that if we go to prison, we will publish the thing, court proceedings, and make some money. We paid him $500 in those days, but nothing came out of it. That was the Fajar and the Socialist Club was essentially a nationalist club, and we were out to build, as I said earlier, a non-communal, multicultural nation. So our first statement at the proclamation of the club was nothing about socialism. Nothing. It was about communalism. If you read it, we did not talk about socialism at all during when we started the club. It was about communalism, and our aim was to build one nation, one country. And whether you believe it or not, at that time, the stand among the English educated and also among the Chinese left was Malay as the national language. The only difference is we will promote the mother tongue of other communities. We will not be against them. But Malay will be the national language. And in fact, we carried it out at a later date, when Chin Song was in the trade unions. And believe it or not, we have Malay classes. I also had to go to Malay school to learn some Malay. We had Malay classes for the trade unions. And Chin Song learned Malay. And during the Barisan Socialist formation, he spoke in Chinese and in Malay on why the Barisan has to be formed. But today, of course, it's a national language, but only when you sing the national anthem. No more than that. And now, the Bandung Spirit. Now where am I? Oh, the next one, yeah? The next one. formation of PAP, betrayal of its constitution. When we won the case, and we preached there, and we built the bridge between the Chinese educated and Kuan Yew, because Kuan Yew wants to form a political party. He was courted by the Labour Front, Lim Yew Hock and that group, but he felt that that group hasn't got a Chinese base. Their supporters were mainly Indian workers in the city council, in the government service, and he felt that that is not good for Singapore's Chinese city. So he decided just to play with them, play one against another, and that is how I came to know him better. I was in his office one day, and there was CHGO on the phone, but it wasn't on the phone. He had phoned up, and Kuan Yew was instigating him to say something about somebody else. And he had it all tape recorded in a big tape recorder. Those days the tape recorder was that size, not so small, it was that size. And in the last drawer of his desk, he pulled it out and asked me to listen and giggle over it. He says, listen, Soo Kai, listen. I thought, very odd. A bit naive in those days. So his aim was to start another party with the Chinese Union support. And to get Chinese Union support, he has, I think, some news about some students, Chinese middle school students, whom we had introduced to him. Because we, at the university, we have contact with the Chinese middle school. We formed the Pan-Malayan Students Federation, we talk to them, we have contact with them, and we were a bridge. So when we won our case, they came to us and said, can you introduce Kuan Yew to them? So we did, and Kuan Yew came to know them. And on that, he built up his Chinese base. And when he formed the PAP, if you see the constitution, it was for democracy, it was to remove the Internal Security Act and better treatment for all workers. We all supported it, but it wasn't to be so. Okay? And that was what happened. In 1956, when he went to London to negotiate with the British, Marshall asked for greater control of internal security. Not even self-government, greater control of internal security. It was supported by Lim Chin Siong, but Kuan Yew and Lim Yew Hock opposed it. In Singapore, I went to see Toh Chin Chai, the chairman, and I told him, what about supporting it? And he was very happy. He wrote and supported. He wrote a press release. And later on, he was to say, we put pressure on him. And Kuan Yew came back and scolded him. He said, Soo Kai, Jamit Singh, and Kam Sui came and pressured me to write. It's not true. He did it willingly. But the London talks failed, and Marshall, instead of keeping to his position, says, I've lost, I've decided you don't want to listen to me, I resign. So Marshall resigned and Lim Yew Hock took over. So the next talk was in 1957. In the meantime, Lim Yew Hock had discussed with Kuan Yew and the British in Singapore. So two things came out from there. One, the Internal Security Council, which means there will be 3 members from Singapore, 3 members from Britain with a casting chairman's vote, and 1 member from Malaya. So that forms the Internal Security Council. Internal Security Council's power is has overriding power, but to arrest anybody, the Internal Security Council says arrest and you arrest. But to release anybody, Singapore government must propose to the Internal Security Council for the release. Okay? That was the condition, which is never told to the people. Kuan Yew just kept quiet. And the second point, which was very important, is that Lim Yew Hock and Kuan Yew agreed to tell the British that in the new constitution, people who are in detention will not be allowed to stand for election. Now this is against British tradition. You find that Britain had arrested people in Ghana, in Nigeria, and when they were elected, they were released from prison and became presidents. But over here in Singapore, Lim Yew Hock and Kuan Yew had agreed to tell the British to introduce that clause into the agreement. Of course, we were all very unhappy, right? Because it was aimed at Chin Seong, who is in detention. It was aimed at James Pucherry, it was James and Woodhull, and all of them were in prison. So they can't stand for election when in prison. Okay? They were in prison in 1956, 57, 58, 59 election, they were still in. So you can't stand for election. And that was Kuan Yew's strength. In fact, the British were very smart. They say, it's a bit difficult for us, if I go to Parliament, people will make a fuss, and they ask, this is from the records, and they ask Lim Yew Hock, does Kuan Yew agree? And Lim Yew Hock says, no opposition from my side. In that case, they said, okay, we shall put it in. But actually, they were very happy. When they say they will put it in, they just put on the front. So we had an Internal Security Council, and at the same time, detainees were not allowed to stand for election. And that was when the PAP was formed, early days. Now, when the PAP stood for election in 59, Kuan Yew said he must release the 6 of the leaders from the unions. Otherwise, he tells them he's not going to stand. I don't think they believed him, but they want to come out. You see, I don't think they believed that he was not going to stand, but they just want to come out and continue the fight. So he proposed that release, and the Internal Security Council agreed to that release, because during that period when he proposed the release, he also assured the British that Chin Seong is his #1 enemy, and he was suggesting ways in which to tighten him up. Okay? So when they were released, he gave them an understanding that if you guys come out, I will release the others not long after. But he did not release any of them. In fact, he blamed the British for not releasing them. And he did not even tell. He did not even bring his own cabinet into his confidence, because the International Labour Organization wrote to Kenny Burns, who was the Minister for Labour, asking why are they keeping the trade unionists in prison. There's no trial, you just keep them there, and ask him to explain. No, he says, he tells the ILO that it's the British. Of course, the British were not happy. They said, I put you in front to take the blame, and you push it all back to me. I mean, that is not fair, right? So the British were very unhappy, and so they wrote the letter and told Kenny Burns that is not the situation. It's the PAP, your PAP did not ask for their release. If they had asked for release, then you can blame us if we don't release. But you did not ask. And all along, Kuan Yew never asked. Okay? And the only time he tried to was in 1961, after he lost Anson in August 61. And then we come to the Barisan. By that time, the people of Singapore was losing faith in him. when he fought in Anson, because Ong Eng Guan wanted to get Chinese support against Kuan Yew, and Ong Eng Guan proposed in the Internal Security Council that all detainees detained before 1959, that is before the PAP came into power, should be released. And of course, it was a shock to Kuan Yew, it was a shock to the British, it was a shock to Malaysia, because here was a PAP member in the Internal Security Council proposing it. So they had to kick him out. You see, Kuan Yew goes to the Internal Security Council representing supposed to be the PAP, but he doesn't discuss any of his program, any of his steps with the Central Committee or with the Politburo. He just maybe with King Sui or Jaranam, that's all, and nobody else. Even Toh Chin Chai doesn't know a thing. Okay? So he was running it all on his own, and that is why many people in the PAP felt there's no transparency. Like Kenny Burns will tell you there's no transparency. He's a Minister for Labour and yet he doesn't know what's happening. Okay? So among the rank and file, we were going around telling them that Kuan Yew promised the release of detainees but nothing done. So the pressure was being built up for Kuan Yew to officially ask for the release of detainees. So he lost Anson, although he had support from the Communist Party and he thought he could win. But apparently the Communist Party was out of touch with the masses. So they lost. Ong Eng Guan won. The people just don't care. You know, they wanted transparency, they wanted more independence, they wanted more democracy, more rights. So Ong Eng Guan stood on that platform against Kuan Yew and unofficially supported by the Communist Party. Now, after Anson, there was after Hong Lim by-election in which Ong Eng Guan won, and the British knew he was going to win. There was a by-election in Anson, and in Anson, David Marshall stood against the PAP and a few other candidates, and he stood on the same platform as Ong Eng Guan did, as the constitution of the PAP does, for more democracy, more transparency, release of detainees. But Kuan Yew now is in a fix. He knows that he will lose if he does not order release of detainees. So he told Selkirk, look, you must help me to protect me from my flank. So I will propose release of detainees. He is going to propose. But I'm telling you in advance, you countermand it. Okay? I mean, Selkirk was not sure what to do because he doesn't want Kuan Yew to lose. At the same time, he doesn't want to do the British to be involved in this sort of maneuvers. After all, the reason for putting Kuan Yew in the front is to take the odium of arrest, the odium of not releasing. So what's the point of you countermanding when he tells you to countermand? So after a while, he wrote to London, and then he told London, look, we can't do this sort of a thing. I don't think he's really morally sure about it, but I think it is to his British interest that he doesn't countermand. It's nothing to do with morals. It's just British interest that he should not countermand, because by not doing that, he put Kuan Yew in a fix. Now Kuan Yew has to take a course of action now. The British is tough. We are not going to help you. No, you make up your mind. So immediately the day after that, the day he received the notice, he told the British, now the die is cast. History will have to take its course. And he went to the assembly and told the speaker, we must call an emergency legislative assembly meeting. Now, legislative assembly meeting is never in a week, unless it's a national emergency. Normally, it's 2 weeks. You give everybody time to study. But it was called emergency. And people were saying this is a party emergency, not a national emergency. So why do you have an emergency national meeting? National assembly meeting. And he had a national assembly meeting on an emergency ticket. And the reason he did that was because during that time we were discussing merger. And he told the British, look, I will fight on the question of merger and not on the question of human rights and detainees issue. So he has fixed it that way. And because he has fixed it that way, nobody knows, but we knew that he was talking to the Tunku, talking to the British, and he was not telling the party central committee, and he was not telling the party people. So many people say, what is this? We are party members, we are cadres, and we know nothing. So there were many people who were opposed to that. So when he talked about it, people say, yes, but let us be open. So since he doesn't want to be open, a group of them decided to oppose him. And they did not, they opposed him by, it was a party split, party intra-party division, and they opposed him. They had no intention to do away with him. But he has already made up his mind. So if you oppose him, out you go. And so these people pushed out. They abstained, but they say, you abstain, you don't have confidence in me, I sack you. So they got sacked. You see? In fact, they asked the PAP to call a meeting of all its branches to discuss merger issue. Now, PAP's branches were hand-picked members. After 1978, 1987, 87, right? After the annual general meeting, when 1960, 1957, I've told you, after he went to London and they agreed that detainees cannot stand for election, there was a lot of people who are unhappy with him. So some people, a more radical type, will say, let us kick him out. Let us kick him out. So there was a group of people, young people, who wanted to kick him out at the General Assembly, at the annual general meeting. But there was a split. There was another group that says, let us keep him there, but we have a bigger say, and then we fight from inside the party instead of kicking him out. Then this second group won. They won 6 seats out of 12, but the chairman is still with them. So they have no control, but they just want to act as a ginger group within the party. And Kuan Yew will not have it. So he says, if that is the case, I don't want to be your Secretary General. You appoint somebody else, and they appointed Titi Raja, and within a few days, off, they all went to prison. Except for Titi Raja, all 5 went under Internal Security Act and was arrested by Lim Yew Hock. And so Lee Kuan Yew came back. And when he came back, he changed the constitution. Now, he said he learned it from the Pope, from the Vatican. That means members of the PAP cannot vote the executive in. The executive will appoint the cardinals, the executive will appoint the cadres, and the cadres will then reappoint the executive. It's like the Pope appointing the cardinals and the cardinals appointing the Pope. So he says that's perfect. He's be sure he won't lose. You see? So he decided on that policy. But it didn't work. It didn't work. Because when he wanted to sack Ong Eng Guan, and Ong Eng Guan, I told you, proposed the release of detainees and stood for he took on the left wing on no detention, the release of detainees, more rights to the workers. Ong Eng Guan was being pushed out. So Ong Eng Guan says, you can't push me out. I'm elected by the cadres. Not by you, not by the members, but by the cadres. So you call a cadres meeting, 500 of them. You call the cadres meeting, and if they say I'm out, then I'm out. Kuan Yew dare not call a cadres meeting. So it didn't work. His plan didn't work. Okay? He dare not call a cadres meeting because he knows he will lose. Okay? Now coming to Anson, by the time Anson he came out, Marshall came up with this, and Kuan Yew was, hesitant. He didn't want to support the left wing call for him. But the left wing, Chin Seong and the others, the 6 of them, had pressure from the ground. After Hong Lim, they know what the ground is. They can't go against the ground. So they were trying to balance. We support the Kuan Yew, but Kuan Yew must be more democratic, and Kuan Yew must consider all these points, but we still support you. You see? That's just balancing. Of course, Kuan Yew will not have it. See? So he told, when he met the British High Com, the British High Com asked him, would you allow any of the 6 to stand and speak at your PAP platform in Anson? He said, no. Perhaps the time for the split has come. Perhaps the time of parting of ways has come. And of course, the British are great diplomats. They write down there and say, we are very chary about asking you to break with the strongest political force in Singapore. When actually they want it all the time. They want Kuan Yew to do that all the time. You see? But Kuan Yew doesn't want to do it for the simple reason that if he does it, he will lose the next general election. That's for sure. And secondly is, if he does that, he has no more bargaining power with the British and no more bargaining power especially with the Tunku, because the Tunku was supporting Lim Yew Hock all the time. So he finds he has no more bargaining power and he's going to lose in the next general election. So he hesitated. He talks tough, but he hesitates. When it comes to a crisis, he backs it down. So now Selkirk will not countermand his request. That means he has reached a final point, and he has therefore to act tough. And so he got the Barisan out. I mean the members of the PAP who were opposed to him out. And then of course Selkirk told him, that if you work hard on merger issue and forget about the detainees issue, forget about the human rights issue, then you will have a chance to win. And so he backed on it. So after that date, all the English newspaper says these guys are communists, these guys are afraid of merger, which is not true. We wanted merger. The people of Singapore wants merger. The problem is merger and what terms. how do we achieve merger, the process of merger, the terms of merger. We were always, right from People's Constitution, supportive of one Malaya, Singapore as part. They were even prepared, Malay as a national language. But how do we go about it? What are the terms? And Tunku, as I told you just now, was calculating on the way in which he can maintain his control, and especially on Malay privileges, and therefore he is afraid of a Chinese vote in. In fact, the Tunku had been discussing merger and he has been very vague about it because he was not sure. But by the time of Anson, by the time of Hong Lim in June 1961, in February 1961, Tunku, in a press conference with the German correspondent, said merger is quite far away. We want a loose understanding, But within 2 months, in March 1961, March or May 61, they knew, the British knew, that Ong Eng Guan is going to win and Kuan Yew is going to lose. And what twisted Tunku's hands and arms, I do not know. Maybe he was also bribed by British telling him you can have North Borneo, Sarawak and Brunei. So he came and said we shall have merger, and we shall have Brunei and Borneo and North Borneo and Sarawak. So it was clear cut then. So merger was then the issue. But the Brunei government under Azahari says, yes, we want to come in, but let us have independence and let our people decide. And so with Sarawak, the SUPP said the same thing. We want to come in, but we have to come in on our own. You don't just push us in. We have an election, we give us independence, and we decide. If the people wants to go in, we go in. But we just don't be pushed in. You see? But they won't have it. They won't have it. In fact, a commission that went to Brunei said 99% of the people in Brunei doesn't want the terms of merger. And that was cabled back to Singapore by AP. And Kuan Yew had a copy of it, and he rang up Selkirk and told Selkirk, look, you tell the AP correspondent in Singapore not to publish it, or I will kick him out. Selkirk was diplomatic. Selkirk says, let me talk to him. And then the wording of the report was changed to, it is believed, in rather vague, vague terms, that so many people is not so happy. It was written in very vague terms. Now, that is for merger. When merger, the people of Singapore is definitely for merger. There's no doubt about it, right from early days. We are all for merger, for a new nation, but we want to know the terms. And that's why here we have factors that play minus the overall British interest. One, the Chinese community, like most other communities, is chiefly interested in livelihood, in their education, and in the citizenship. They saw Singapore as an inalienable part of Malaya, but they're interested in that, and they want to preserve their livelihood. But they also say that no matter what happens, they have struggled, and they will struggle, and they will still succeed. That's what they say in the papers, you see. So it wasn't that important, but citizenship and was important. The UMNO leaders, of course, were interested in the special position, in the special rights for the Malays, and therefore there was a difference of opinion, difference of discussion. And it was not put openly, and it wasn't discussed. So Kuan Yew discussed with Tunku without letting anybody know, without letting his party know, without letting his executive know In fact, Toh Chin Chai in his latest book says, I was in the dark. I mean, how could he be in the dark? When he was in the dark. And yet when we brought the issue up in the Legislative Assembly and asked Kuan Yew to explain what are the terms of merger, he prorogued the whole thing and won't let us discuss. We didn't know, so we asked for information. What happened? And among that information was one thing which we asked Kuan Yew point blank. Was the naval base in Singapore, do they have nuclear weapons aimed at China? Mind you, this was 1962. China has no nuclear bomb. So were we armed with nuclear weapons aimed at China? Kuan Yew didn't want to reply. He knew, he was told, because the records has it that the British High Com told Kuan Yew, this is not negotiable, and so it cannot be said. If this news had been confirmed, the people of Singapore won't be voting for the PAP. You can be sure of that. So the PAP found that merger was their only way to keep their position, and therefore they were very happy to cooperate with the British and with the Federation to destroy the left wing, which practically destroys them all. You know? So at that period, because of the lack of trust, lack of faith, and PAP not going by its own constitution, and we were therefore pushed out. We were inside the party, trying to change the party from inside, you know. But he just called the assembly meeting and said, you support me unconditionally or you're out. And so we were out. And when we were out, we formed the Barisan Socialists. Okay? And that is how Barisan Socialists came into being. And the constitution of the Barisan Socialists was, the registration of the Barisan Socialists was delayed. Not like Arul, delayed 10 years. The constitution of the Barisan Socialists was delayed for about 10 days. And it was delayed because they say your constitution is the same as the PAP constitution. That was the argument they gave. You can't have the same constitution as the PAP constitution. But our argument is the PAP doesn't follow its constitution. Okay? But finally we did get registration, yes. By 1962, the die was cast. They had to arrest us because we were a very big party. Practically 90% of PAP's branches came over to us. Even Lee Kuan Yew's Tanjong Pagar branch came over to us, and they had no branches. So they have to depend on the civil servants, and they have to depend on the Internal Security Act. Okay? But Kuan Yew always maintained that he doesn't want to use the Internal Security Act, but when in the Internal Security Council he says he wants to use it. Okay? So double talk, you see. So in December 1962, December, before Azahari's revolt in Brunei, they had agreed to arrest the Barisan Socialist leaders and the trade unions. They already agreed. But Kuan Yew, to save his neck, had two speculations. One, Kuan Yew says Tunku must arrest Lim Ken Siu, must arrest Ahmad Bustaman, and arrest Malaysian leaders so that it is a pan-Malayan arrest and not a Singapore arrest. You see, it must be a pan-Malayan affair. I'm not dealing with my opponents. This is anti-communist, anti whatever you call it, but it's pan-Malayan. You see, and second, you must have a press conference, Malaya, Singapore, in Kuala Lumpur. Okay? attending the meeting was Ismail, Dr. Ismail, and he just agreed. But when the news reached Tunku, Tunku says, no, 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 I'm not going to bear the responsibility. Tunku was smart. Tunku says, no, I don't arrest Ken Yew, I don't arrest Ahmad Bustaman. They are my members for parliament. Why should I help Kuan Yew? There's no reason for me to help Kuan Yew. So he objected. So the plan was aborted. Aborted, completely aborted. Couldn't carry out. Kuan Yew did, Tunku won't agree, and the plan was aborted. So in December, we were not arrested. And then Brunei revolt occurred, and that was a chance for the British, an excuse to say that we were supplying guns to Azahari. And the Straits Times report on our arrest, the day of our arrest, February the 2nd, 1963, had headlines, Barisan Socialists supplying guns and all that to Azahari. And you know who were the reporters? Lim Kit Siang was one of the chief reporters. But he says it is from official sources. From official sources. But I think he should apologize and say, if the official source is a fraud, then you must not keep your secret, right? If the official source is truthful, you can keep your secret. But if the official source is a fraud, you can't keep your secret. And we don't have to say it's a fraud. The British Archives itself says that interrogation shows that we are not only not helping them, but we were trying to keep our distance. Just the reverse. And that is black and white in the archives. We were trying to keep our distance because we don't want to be involved. But we support them morally. Like we support Lumumba, we support all the anti-colonial movements. We support them morally. But we don't, and we have no guns to supply them either. Right? So that was the situation. So when we were arrested, that was the charge against us. And the charge against me was, I'm pro-communist, no more. And they charged me for Fajr. So I told them, Kuan Yew was a lawyer, and I got acquitted, but the judge just kept quiet. That's all. Yeah, simple as that. There's no other charges. Okay? I had one more charge. I was in the Malaysian Socialist Conference in KL, where we asked, we supported the Sarawak, the Brunei, and North Borneo, Stephen Yong, and North Borneo, that they should have independence before they move in. And that is all we did. But that was good enough for arrest. Okay, I think the last one will be with our arrest. It was very tough for the unions. Union leaders were arrested, union members were arrested. They go to another place to work. You're black mark, and you can't work. You know. And even your family will go and teach. They'll come and tell the family, hey, this fellow is dangerous, don't let them teach your children. So they had a very tough time. You know. In fact, most of the unions still fought on until end of '63 with Jing Kui and the others in charge. And then after that, they were completely smashed. So today, the left wing, the organized forces, is not the union. It's just like here. Your MTUC, if I know David and all that, it's not here. It's the MTUC on that is also smashed. So the forces that is against has now become the NGOs. And Singapore, we are seeing a growth of some NGOs. Okay? But the trade union movement as a whole cannot coalesce. You know? Then they will prosecute you. Like recently, the Chinese workers from China who were employed as bus drivers, Chinese workers from China who were employed as bus drivers found they were discriminated against, their treatment was poor, and their wages were not good enough. So they decided to protest The official line of protest is to see the management. They did that. They went officially, they went through that line of protest, and they got no result. No result. So they decided to stay at home, don't work. See? They didn't even have a gathering, you know. They didn't even have a gathering. They just choo, and then they stayed at home. And they were arrested and charged for going on strike. And they say there's zero tolerance. So people are asking them, what about zero tolerance for your officials who didn't want to solve the case? So by the way, these guys, some of them were sentenced to prison, and quite a number of them were deported. So you find that there is brewing something on the ground because people are not happy, you know, and that is the situation today. Now about the last one, the recent development, whether we are going to get a merger or not, that's very difficult to answer. Very difficult to answer, but I can only say that in Singapore, the opposition is also gathering strength. People are less fearful, you see, but also because economically they are not doing well. We have a high GDP, and most of it comes from foreign money laundered in. You get money laundered in through the casinos. Easy to launder money, you have a casino. You just bring the money there, change the chips, tell the man, I give you 10%, return the chips, and you get clean money. That is how they work. I mean, that is one of the functions of a casino, a major function. And once you have a money clean, you buy a house, and you keep the money there. You don't produce any wealth. You just speculate M to M dash. No C. You know, and that is and when you do that, inflation goes up, the wages doesn't go up, and when the private houses go up, the government also raises its HDB flat. So when you buy a flat many years ago for about $60,000, you can pay back within 15 years if you have work. But now if the flat goes to $250,000 and your salary remains the same, it will take you your whole lifetime to pay back. So those people who have flats, the older generation, think they have got money in their pocket because the flats are now very much more expensive. So the minister tells you, if you retire, and when you buy a flat, you use the CPF money to buy the flat, right? But when you buy a flat with CPF money, you still pay your 4 or 5% for the loan, you see? And in the meantime, you get nothing for your CPF because no capital goes in, they don't pay you interest. You follow? When you work, you pay CPF, right? The CPF goes into the fund, right? So the government pays you an interest on the CPF. But when your earning goes to the house, you get nothing from CPF. But you still have to pay for the loan. So you're paying double. You're paying double. Your interest rate is double, right? You're not earning here and you're paying there, when you should be earning here, right? So people are not happy. They are not fools, you see? So because the houses are high, many young people can't afford, and so the government tells you, if you can't afford, retire and move over the causeway. Sell your flat and move over the causeway. But when they sell their flat, they got no place to stay, so they then move across the causeway. And that's what the PAP advised the younger people to do, but that cannot happen for everybody, right? And the younger people will find it very difficult. So by the time they pay everything, they have no money in the CPF. How do they live on? Rent out rooms. So when you retire, you probably, instead of having one flat, you have one room, and 2 other rooms are rented out for income. And that is the situation today. So people are not so happy. But anyway, as far as I can see, economic factors is more important now for merger than before. And this concept of inalienable part of Malaya, this concept is getting less. Unfortunately, more people are not thinking like that. So we have to change that. We have to change that mentality. They feel we are Singaporeans, and Malaysians feel they're Malayans, and that the Singaporeans don't feel that we are part of Malaya. That mentality will have to be changed. Okay, that's all. Thank you.